Hi, I'm Doug from Dynamic Computing, and welcome to episode 132 of 10 Minute Amiga Retro Cast. Today, I'm introducing a new resident to the 10 Mark Labs, the beautiful Commodore CDTV. A viewer of mine, Leftover Beefcake, he messaged me a week or so ago and said that he saw one on eBay at a really nice price. It was an impressive price. But the thing was listed as totally non-working. The guy selling it said that the fan would come on, nothing else would come on, nothing at all. So I took a chance, contacted him on eBay, made him an offer, and he kindly accepted. I just said, hey, this thing may or may not work. I may or may not have 50 hours worth of work ahead of me trying to get it working. But he sold it to me, shipped out of Colorado, and I literally had this beautiful CDTV the next day. So I took a peek at it. Now it was listed as not working, so I didn't even know what to expect. Sure enough, fan comes on, you can hear it buzz in the back. Nothing. No LEDs, no power lights, no activity anywhere on the board. Nothing. So I was wondering what kind of fresh hell I was getting myself into. I figured it could be anything from a simple repair to a living nightmare. So I thought I'd start at the beginning, at the power supply. So I opened the power supply up, took a look around, and I saw this inside the power supply. That's a 5-volt fuse. No, that's a 250 volt fuse, I believe, 5 amp. It was toast. It was blackened. This thing had taken a huge hit in the power supply at some point in time. And right then and there I thought, okay, that fuse is burned so badly it probably went and blew the board too. So I went down to my local Ace Hardware, picked up a couple of fuses just to be on the safe side, came back, popped the little guy in. It booted right up. Just boom, right up. I did not expect that one at all. So what is the CDTV exactly? Well, it was announced by Commodore back in 1990, and then it shipped in early 1991. It was designed to be one of the set-top boxes, which were the miracle devices that we all heard about in the late 80s and early 90s that were going to take over the world, and they didn't. Well, that's life. There's some great videos on the history of the CDTV. One of my favorite is done by none other than Neil from RMC. I'll put a link right up on here because he actually had an interview with Gail Wellington, which is one of the key players in the whole CDTV strategy. And she's got some great insights, and I recommend you guys watch that video. Of course, after you're done binge watching all 150 or so of my videos, then run over to Neil's, take a look at what he can do. I kind of get what they were doing. The Amiga's goal was to hide the fact that this was an Amiga and instead present it as a multimedia appliance for your family. So you're going to see them at, the equivalent of what Best Buy and Circuit City would have been back then, in the stereo departments and the audio departments, and offer them as set-top boxes instead of full-fledged computers. I kind of get it. They even made their Amiga dealers, when they sold Amigas and CDTVs, pinky promise that they would display the two units very far apart and separately so people don't get confused. So again, I get what they're doing. Commodore was not always a computer company. They made typewriters, they made calculators, they made radios, they made filing cabinets. And so it's normal for them to think, okay, let's branch our business off again so we don't have all our little eggs in one basket. Unfortunately, it just did not work out. So let's dig into the CDTV a little bit. We're going to take a nice close look at it and see what it does. And speaking of reviews, I've watched a lot of CDTV reviews on YouTube. I've read a ton of reviews online, and almost every single one of them says the same thing. The CDTV is an Amiga 500 with a CD slapped on. No, it's not. According to that logic, an Amiga 2000 is just an Amiga 500 with Zorro slots. An Amiga 600, that's just an Amiga 500 with PCMCIA and IDE. The new Mac M1 Studio, that's just a regular Mac from 1985 with a color display bolted on and a hard drive interface. Come on, guys. The CDTV is its own unique piece of hardware, and I'm going to show you why. Let's take a look. She is a lovely little beast, isn't she? Just absolutely looks like a piece of nice quality audio equipment. Let's get the top off. This one does not have any screws included with it, so I'll get some new ones. Now the first thing you'll notice is this looks absolutely nothing like an Amiga 500. Absolutely no similarity at all. As a matter of fact, here's an Amiga 500 motherboard for comparison. Amiga 500, CDTV. Amiga 500, CDTV. They don't even look the same. See how it has no belly slot, no side expansion. It has no floppy controller on the board, no keyboard pins on the board. It is totally its own unique thing. It's got two ROMs instead of one. One of them is a 1.3 ROM. The other one is a custom ROM that controls the CD. It's got a CD interface here, RAM in a totally different location. Has these cables in the front here designed to communicate with the LEDs in the front of the display, which also talk to the computer itself. Literally, the only thing that this truly has in common with an Amiga 500 is the 68,000 processor and the Paula chip. Everything else is the newer ECS equipment, which the Amiga 500 natively was not ECS. The CDTV is not an Amiga 500 with a CD-ROM. The CDTV is a CDTV based on Amiga ECS technology. But now that I'm off my high horse, let's see what this little thing can do. Now, the most important component is the CDTV remote control, which is actually really attractive. You've got a D-pad right here, which is nice. You've got all these numbers right here that work exactly like numbers on an Amiga keyboard, no difference at all. You've got an escape key, an enter key, Genlock, CD/TV to switch kind of inputs there, joystick mouse port switch that allows the controller to work like either a joystick or a mouse, power button. The volume here controls the volume for the headphone jack, not for the rest of it in general. The CDTV remote control is actually very, very strong as far as remote controls. You can use it from a very, very far distance away, even at weird angles or bouncing it off windows. It is one of the more powerful remotes that I've found, and it's really quite nice. Now, I had a problem with my controller. It would work fine for, say, 1, maybe 2 minutes. Everything would work fine. Then the thing would just freeze up. Nothing, no control. Maybe a minute later, or maybe after I popped the batteries out, it would start working again for another minute or two. So I did a little research, and this little guy has one single SMD cap in it. Take a look at this little video I made and put on Facebook, and you'll see what I discovered about the cap. Does that trace just to the left of that SMD cap look compromised to you? I'm thinking that looks like it's bubbling up a little bit under there. Maybe the cap has spilled some goo. And you can see the traces on there. They look gunky. There was no smell coming from it. I couldn't see anything coming out of the cap, but the traces around it just looked like it was maybe just bubbling up a little bit. So I scraped off the copper, so it's just bare copper on the traces, and I replaced that SMD cap. And this thing started working like an absolute champ, and I've not had one single problem with it. Now, the way you can test something like that, I've got my cover off the infrared here, I'll put that back later, is you can take a cell phone and you can hold it up with your camera and look at it through the cell phone. And when you push buttons, you'll see the little infrared light up and start blinkety blinkety blink. And on mine, I noticed it would blinkety blinkety blink just fine until it froze up. When it froze up, that LED was solid. It was bright as it could possibly get, and it was not transmitting any information. That's how I knew it was the controller and not the unit itself. So just a little FYI tip to test your own infrared peripherals. Of course, what was the most important thing about the CDTV? Well, that would be the CD itself. Now it uses these special carriers. This one is black. They also had some tan ones, where the CD slides right into the carrier right here and protects the CD. That was kind of the goal of it. And then this kind of slides open to reveal it. And you'd buy a couple of these, and you'd keep your CDs in there if you want to. They're fine. They work fine. They kind of lost favor after a year or two, and most of the CDs are in trays like they are today. But what you do is you just slide this right in. Then the CDTV detects it's an audio CD and should automatically load up the audio CDTV screen that you see here. Now let's take a look at a few of the features here. If you can see the little moving cursor up there, the little white circle, you can start a song here. You can skip to the next one, pause. You can do the first 10 seconds of a song. Let's do that. This is my good friend, Joe Jencks, and he is a fantastic musical artist. His information will be in the description. Well, let's set it up on 10-second play. So now it's playing the first 10 seconds of each song. Jump to the next one. It's 10 seconds of that song. That's kind of cool. Now, here, we'll go to shuffle play. Boom! Now it's going to shuffle all of the songs around. We could even put it on 10-second shuffle again. And it'll start with song 3, then it'll go to 5, then to 2. So that's kind of fun. You can go to individual songs here. Now some of these other options here, like here's repeat play. Here you can clear out which songs you want to play and then manually add some in. This bottom one is for CD plus graphics discs, which are rather uncommon. They'll allow you to listen to audio and then see some pictures on the screen. There are some karaoke CDs and a couple of artists that had them, but they're hard to find. But when you're done playing your audio CD, just press the button, pops it out, and after a really cool little animation, it will jump to the CDTV screen again. Now, Jim Sachs did all of the graphics for the CDTV interface. If you don't know Jim Sachs, he's done some incredible Amiga artwork over the years, including being the art director for Defender of the Crown for CDTV. Let's take a look and see how this is different from other versions. Again, we just pop the little tray in there. It'll detect that it's a CDTV game and automatically launch it, and we'll give it a minute to start. Once the intro graphics come up and it starts playing this cool little tune, it takes a moment to load. Remember that CD-ROMs this is a single speed one, so it's only 150K per second, which seems like it'd be a lot faster than a floppy, but it doesn't always feel a lot faster to load up.
In the year
now you'll notice that there's some spoken words in here.
When the king returned from the Holy Land,
Start the game.
He united 6 great warriors who had carried him to victory over the infidels.
Now from here, now that we've seen the introduction and heard the beautiful speaking, we choose your character. Now I'll choose Jeffrey Longsword, since that was, you know, my nickname when I was young and single. And it will jump right into the game. But first there'll be some more spoken words as you speak with Robin of Locksley. So as you can see, not blazingly fast, doesn't feel a tremendous amount faster than the floppy version, but it may be. There's a lot more going on here with all the digitized audio and everything. But let's move along and look at something else.
An assassin has taken the king's life. The kingdom.
So with 650 megabytes of storage, you'd figure they'd have some fantastic stuff on here. This is one of my favorites. This is called Advanced Military Systems. Now, Commodore had developed this technology called CD-XL, which allowed for 4,096 color animations and videos with synchronized audio. So you figure something like this, where it's showing you military hardware, would be absolutely perfect for something like that. Let's take a quick look at this and see if it's got any cool technology like that. So you can see the introduction is actually pretty cool once it loads up. It's a beautiful Ham 6 image. Almost everything on here is Ham 6. Let's see if we can go a little further into here. Talking about who did their stuff. Fantastic.
To begin, press the A button shown flashing green. If you would like help getting started, press any one of the remote control directional buttons shown flashing red.
Okay, I would be happy to press the A button to continue on with the program. I think I too could get a job narrating this program.
Advanced
Now
military
this
systems
actually looks
has
really
a
good here. This is a nice
simple
Ham
and
6
easy
image showing a lot of the
system.
images on here. I really appreciate
Each
the look
menu
here.
screen has a series
Wait for
of
this to
selection
finish.
items ranged in.
And here at the main menu, which again is very beautiful, you can choose what kind of military equipment you want to look at. Tanks, planes. Let's look at some aircraft here. Now what would be really cool is if they had some cool videos of these craft taking off, moving around, maybe doing some examples of, firing their weapons, because the technology was there and it could, in theory, do it. Everyone likes the B-2 bomber. And here's a happy little slideshow. Now, the image quality of most of these is good. The audio quality is great. The image quality is okay, but the Amiga can do better than this. For some reason, these pictures always looked a little yellowish to me. Maybe it's how they digitized them, scanned them in, but I've seen better, but these are actually really good. They're actually really sharp, and there's a lot of good information here, but it'd be so much cooler if it had actual animations of the planes moving too. Let's move along and take a look at something else. So just bringing over existing Amiga games on a new product like this, that's the right thing to do, absolutely. Adding things like the speech to the games, maybe adding music, adding levels as the product launches, thumbs up. But then the next generation of games should have been unique to the CDTV, taking advantage of its particular strengths, which they didn't. I've done the coverage of the Grolier's Encyclopedia before on my A570 CD-ROM channel. I'll let you watch that video. But none of them took full advantage of what the CDTV could do. Grolier's and the Advanced Weapon System should have had fantastic animations, even a couple just really to show it off. They should have had more pictures. They should have had more digitized sound, more digitized speech to really take advantage of what the CDTV could do. So my opinion of the CDTV library, well, it kind of sucks. And I'm not looking at it with 2022 eyes. I'm looking at it from 1991 eyes. At that time that the CDTV came out, I knew what the Amiga was capable of. I saw what it was capable of. I created stuff on the Amiga. And I look back at the stuff that came out for the CDTV, and I'm just kind of interesting, but doesn't seem like it's taken full advantage of it. So I'm not a fan of some of the customized CDTV titles. That's fine, I don't have to be. Does that mean I don't like the CDTV? Nay. I love the CDTV. It had a huge potential back in the day, and it could have become something just incredible. Let's take a closer look at the actual CDTV hardware now. Come on. Of course, on the front we have a headphone jack right there, standard headphone jack, the CD. A nice clock, that's the infrared port for the remote. You can control the CD right from here in case you want to do it without the screen on. Volume, again, just for the headphones. Reset button. Behind this little trap door, there's a memory card socket for either 64K or 256K cards. They look like PCMCIA, but they're predecessor to PCMCIA, and they were designed to store things like game progress and program settings. I'll keep my eye out for one. Let's take a look around at the back of the machine. Here we have a standard power socket. Above it, we have a little round DIN for a mouse and for a keyboard. These are not standard Amiga mouse and keyboard connectors. These are proprietary CD-TV. There are adapters available, and there were back in the day, to allow you to use different, more standardized pieces of hardware, and we'll talk about that in another video. Standard Amiga audio out here, left and right. This also pumps the sound out from the CD-TV, or from the CD, right through these same ports that the Apollo audio goes. Standard Amiga floppy disk drive port, standard Amiga serial port, standard Amiga parallel port, standard Amiga RGB video. This is what allows you to run the machine like a regular Amiga, which we will talk about. Now here we have MIDI ports, MIDI in and MIDI out. It's the first Amiga that used MIDI, just like the Atari ST did. And just like the Atari ST, 95% of the users never did anything with these ports, but for the 5% that used them, they were awesome. This expansion port, this comes right off, and there's a slot right behind here that you can put a SCSI card in, which is absolutely awesome. And I have one on order, should be here in a couple of days. We can actually add a hard drive right to the CD-TV. Now this is also cool. One thing about the CD-TV, and this information I got right from my pal Chris Edwards, who's doing a great series on CD-TV on his channel. The Amiga normally is either PAL or NTSC. It's got either a PAL crystal or an NTSC crystal. But look what they did with the CD-TV. They have both crystals right on here, both a PAL and an NTSC crystal. It knows whether it's going to operate in PAL or NTSC mode depending on which video slot adapter they have in here. Take these two screws out, this entire assembly pops out. This is an NTSC one. You've got RF, channel select, gorgeous composite video, gorgeous S video. Every piece of video from the CD-TV you've seen today has come out of the S video port, and it is flawless. It is as good as Amiga video gets for this kind of connector. But you pop in one that maybe has a SCART connector on it, the Amiga sees it and says, oh, I'm going to be a PAL machine, I suppose. Now there's another thing you can do. You can boot up, as we're going to do in a minute, off a floppy disk. Boot up into a Workbench. That works fine. There's a program called Degrader, many probably have heard of, that we used to use back in the day to make old programs work on newer equipment. You launch Degrader on here, you tell it, hey, boot up in 50 megahertz PAL mode. This machine, until you power it down, will then think it's a PAL machine and run 100% in PAL mode until you hard shut down the computer. It survives resets, which is cool. Another option, see that little blob of solder right there? That's J11. If that is closed, this is an NTSC machine. It boots up and it says, I'm NTSC machine, happy, happy, joy, joy. You cut that little piece of solder right there, boot it up, it says, I'm a PAL machine. So you get yourself a little switch, hook a little switch up onto there, run it out the back, toggle up for PAL, down for NTSC, easy peasy lemon squeezy. Now I thought this was clever here. They're using the same or a similar kind of zip RAM that the Amiga 3000 used for the 1 megabyte of chip RAM and the 1 megabyte Agnus there. So that's kind of cool. You've got your standard 68,000 chip here. You've got a nice DMAC chip here. Of course, it's got Gary, Paula, Denise on here. Also has this port right here. This is called a diagnostic port that wasn't used by Commodore, but people have ingeniously come up with 2 meg and 8 megabyte RAM expansions that fit right in here, sit right down in there, gives your thing 8 megabytes of fast RAM. I got one of those on order. So what all this means is if you plug a floppy disk in here at bare minimum, you could even put multiple floppies in there, or you get a hard drive interface for it, this becomes 100% an Amiga that boots up and can use a keyboard and mouse in these ports. All right, now look what I'm doing here. I've got Edu Arana's awesome little floppy Go Techie type device. that plugs in externally. The system sees this as DF0. It boots right off this. So I plug in this little Go Techie type device into disk drive here. I can then boot any OCS, ECS game off of the flash drive here, or I can plug in a real floppy disk if I want to and boot up. Kind of cool. Let's go ahead and get it booted up and see what we can see. So look what we can do here. I've got my little LED. I can just switch this right to Workbench 1.3. As soon as the CDTV recognizes it, it boots from floppy and it's going to boot right up into Workbench 1.3 mode. That looks familiar, doesn't it? And again, this video is coming right out of the S-Video socket from here, and it is absolutely beautiful quality. Now, once Workbench is loaded on here, I just use the controller. I switch it to joystick mode by pressing the button, switch it out of joystick mode into mouse mode. Now I'm using the directional keys on the controller to emulate a little mouse. And look at this, there's Workbench right there, comes right up. You can launch anything you want from here, including the shell. And here you can see that the number keys actually just emulate number keys on a keyboard, and that's about all you can do. Not very exciting there, but look what we can do with this Degrader program. We're going to go ahead and move this. There's Degrader. Now my goal is I'm going to make an actual boot floppy that probably just asks you when you boot. It'll just boot to a command prompt, ask you if you want to launch Degrader and go into PAL mode. But for now, I'm launching it manually. Here, I can tell it 50 Hertz mode, 50 Hertz system. So now when I reboot, I don't need to change any of these other things, although I could if I wanted to. I click on Survive Resets, boom, it resets, and when this thing resets, it is 100% in PAL mode. So we've launched into PAL mode, and we've launched River Raid Reloaded, which is a PAL-only game that is absolutely incredible. One of my favorites. And so let's see how it looks. We'll start the game. And of course, this is a reimagining of the classic Atari 2600 game, River Raid. Plays the same, new features, absolutely beautiful graphics, new sound effects, and I'm playing it with the CDTV gamepad, and it actually plays fairly well. Until you crash into a ship. Then it plays worse when you crash into a ship. Now, one caveat about PAL mode on here is if you try and then display PAL mode through your S-Video or composite, that's probably not going to work very well. But you play it back through RGB like I'm doing right now, it works perfect. I'm using this through one of my RGB to SCART to HDMI solutions on the CDTV, and PAL programs work absolutely fantastic. So we can boot up into PAL mode just fine. Unless you've got an actual PAL monitor, you're probably going to have to use Amiga RGB to get to play PAL games, but it works absolutely beautifully. So we've determined the CDTV is really cool and really nice. So why did it fail? Well, price and marketing. Number one was price. In the United States, they released this thing at $999. And we Amiga users, because remember, I was there at the time, we laughed out loud. And laughing out loud was not even a thing back then, but we LOL'd. $1,000? No thank you. And we just completely passed on the CDTV as Amiga users. What they were probably trying to do is maybe make it appear expensive, so the audiophiles will be like, oh yes, we need to drink our bourbon and listen to our CDs, and they drop $1,000. They needed to put this thing at about $500 and then sell the keyboard and monitor and mouse separately, and then for $800 or something like that, you'd have a complete system. It would have sold a lot better. The other thing was marketing. I mean, Amiga was famous for hiring people from Pepsi Cola and expecting them to be able to market high-end, gorgeous computers. Just idiots, just idiots. They needed to scream from the rooftops that this thing was an Amiga. Absolutely. Hey, CD audiophiles, this is for you. It's got MIDI, it plays back CDs, but it's an Amiga, and there's a whole library of incredibly cool things you can do with it. They would have done back in 1991 with maybe a $500 price point. They'd have sold 10 times as many at least. By the time they figured this out and they lowered the price and started bundling the hardware with it, it was already like 1993, and PCs were starting to bundle CD-ROMs with their computers, and they missed their window. So what are my plans for the CDTV? I've got 8 megs coming in for it. I've got the SCSI controller coming in for it. I've got a blue SCSI that should be on its way soon. I'm going to test that out with it. I've got the keyboard interface, so I can use a PS2 keyboard. I've got a mouse and joystick interface coming in, so I can use an Amiga mouse and Amiga joysticks with it, so I don't have to spend $500 on a CDTV keyboard. It's going to be a full-blown Amiga computer with a nice CD and look absolutely stunning with the rest of my equipment. What am I going to use it for? I'm going to load this thing with Amiga OS 1.3 and something like Eagle Player, and I'm going to have thousands of mod files on here. I'm going to create a library of mod files that the CDTV can, randomly shuffle through. Plus, it's got the ability to play back CDTV images or CDs. It's going to be a great music system for me out here. I'm also going to be experimenting a lot with CD-XL. Now, you guys have seen my AGA Blaster video. I did a review of it, and then just a couple weeks ago I released the Amiga Art Contest promo in AGA Blaster format. All AGA Blaster is CD-XL on steroids, and that software in Unix, in Linux, can create original CD-XL images. I'm going to have fun with that, creating some cool CD-XL images, burning them on CD, and playing them back on this thing. I think it's going to be fun. Huge thanks to my patrons who are now scrolling across the absolutely gorgeous Jim Sachs CDTV logo. You guys are the best. I love you. If you're interested in joining the fun and helping out the show, pop on over to patreon.com/10mark for more information about how you can join in. Don't forget, if you are a patron, you are allowed to vote in the Amiga Art Contest 2022. Send in those submissions too, people. Thanks for joining me today. I really appreciate it. I now have a ton of new video that's going to be coming out, a lot of it on the CDTV as we explore this thing, as we upgrade this thing. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. If you do any cool things with your CDTV, if you have any cool hardware, hit me up. Let me know in the comments below. Send me a message on one of my social media accounts. Let me know what you do with your CDTV. I'd love to learn more about it. Heck, I'd love to buy more goodies for it. Please like, comment, and subscribe. We're just about to cross that 6,000 subscriber threshold. Next milestone is going to be 10,000. We're going to get there soon. That's going to be fun. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. But until next time, this is Doug from 10 Minute Amiga Retro Cast, signing out.